Shane, take us to the end of this with that quote on antifragility and give us some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, antifragility. It is a very complex topic if you want to get in really deep into it. I'd like to keep things as simple as possible. If we delve too deep into it, it is confusing. So I'm going to try and skim across the top of antifragility. And it does kind of mean what you think it might mean. It's the opposite of fragile. But as something is fragile, the opposite being anti-fragile is actually more extreme, in that when something is anti-fragile, it thrives on that chaos. It does better, performs better in complex situations or in difficult times. And a simple example, at least simple in my head, it may not be so simple for you guys. Simple example is comparing the stock market to gold and silver, right? So you're an investor at Paris. I know hopefully this will ring true with you. As an investor, you want to take advantage of the growth that's happening in the markets, right? In the equities, bond stocks, whatever, right? Because if you didn't, you would have missed out for the past couple of decades because of, everything's just gone up, right? Markets have always gone up. But you know that gold and silver it's God's money, it's from nature, it's robust, it's resilient, it has all these properties that the stock market doesn't have. You look at the stock market, it's overvalued, it's fragile, anything could happen, it could collapse at any day, right? Yet gold and silver are always there. And so what we're seeing now is war breaks out, right? What happens? Stock market goes down, gold and silver go up. They're thriving on this chaos. And so that's really the best example I can think of right now of anti-fragility. So, you can think of words like robust or being able to adapt. I think we'd like to think of ourselves this way. Like I can easily adapt. I'm pretty tough under stress. At least I have to think that way, right? But when that stress comes in, do you actually thrive? And I think, of course, of a few friends we have, Jeff Kirkham, for example. Yes, he was a Ranger for 26 and a half years. You got to count that half year, right? That's very important. Absolutely, he is anti-fragile. If anybody I can think of is anti-fragile, it's Jeff. And so this anti-fragile topic can be applied to anything, really. But how do we apply it to ourselves in preparedness, in becoming ready for what we think might happen? And that's up to each of us, right, of what we're preparing for. Some people are preparing for the lights to go out for a couple hours or a couple of days at most, right? Some people are preparing for the literal end of the world, right? There's all these extremes in between. So do you believe in survival of the fittest? That's where I'm going, right? Or are you that tree in the wind that is constantly in the wind, that grows stronger every day, right? Those are kind of what anti-fragility means. And so I think each of you are going to need to take a little bit of time and learn about anti-fragility. I've got the book on the way. I'm going to read it. I think it's going to be a lot more complex than I care for it to be, and that for me to read, because it gets into all different aspects of life, about war, economics, biology, and it applies to all these different topics. But anti-fragility, think about, like you're saying, Scott, when something comes up, do we panic? Or do we actually get excited? Yes, this is where I thrive.
I've trained for this.
Exactly. Right? I'm ready for this. And I think that's where a lot of these preppers say, I'm ready for the end of the world to come, right? Bring it on, let it all collapse. Yes, it will solve some problems, but I think that's also why, where that anti-fragility kicks in, right? Because and I include myself in this too, right? Because I often find myself saying, let it all come down. Bring it down right now. This is ridiculous. Because I see what I can accomplish after that as well. And so it's a huge topic that I encourage each of you to spend some time on, and because I'm not sure if I did it justice in the few minutes I took there about anti-fragility.
Well, I think you give it a really good understanding for most of the listeners. They're going to really understand that well, as far as it's the tree in the wind and the elements and everything else, right? It's not just going to blow over at the next storm. But the tree that grew in a greenhouse with no wind,
Mhm.
with less light, like it may grow taller, faster, but then if you move that greenhouse away from it, the first windstorm's going to rip the roots right out.
Yeah.
And we had a really neat experience with that. Just last year, we had this windstorm that whipped through where I live, and there were all these trees just ripped out because their roots were shallow, right? They were fragile. Their roots were shallow because people were overwatering. They weren't letting it water deep. They were watering a lot, a little at a time. And so the roots stayed at the surface. And so when it comes to anti-fragility, it's making sure you're going deep, right? Making sure you're putting in,
Mhm.
grabbing onto these things, grabbing onto practicing anti-fragility, practicing resilience, practicing working on your mindset, practicing the skills that we've talked about. That's how you build anti-fragility.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to get at and helping you understand what anti-fragility is.
Reminds me of a really neat quote that I've heard, and you've probably seen it go around, but good times create weak men create tough times create strong men, and then strong men create good times.